Welcome to Witch Hat Chats. My name is Nikki Kirby. I am your host, and Pam Griffith is your co-host. We are presented by the Ever-Moving We Rise Temple, the Laughing Soul Holistic Center, and Moonlight Potions and Charms. So we are known as the Witchy Ones, Pam and I. And Pam, I was talking this week on Facebook about I went into Barnes and Noble. Haven't been in Barnes and Noble for a while, but instead of our books being in a section called New Age or Occult Philosophies or something like that, they changed the subject to self transformation. So, what do you think about that?
Oh, that's kind of cute. Yeah, I like that. Many times if we're stuck in the occult department, not many people will come over there because we're in the occult department. Self-transformation. That's actually what a witch is. She transforms herself every day to be a better witch. So that's kind of almost like a self-help. You want to be a witch? Transform into one.
Yeah,
I find that interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. But it's just only one aspect of what we do because we also help our community. And I don't know. I guess with mainstream religions, they all have their own little title. And we're a 501c church now, organization. We're recognized by the federal government. And so, I'm sitting here thinking, why can't we obtain our own little section?
That is coming. At one time, in order to get our books, they weren't in mainstream stores. I remember the first time I saw a Wiccan book in a mainstream store. And in fact, as I was a young lady growing up, you could not find the occult section. It was in the reference books behind the library, depending on what public library you went to. Mine, it was. So in order for me to check out a book, and I'm talking, oh, well, I've been on the path for a half a century. So I'm talking about that long ago. In order to find a book on witchcraft, unless it was a historical document, you had to go to the reference. You had to request it from the librarian. And I'm telling you, I'm being upfront, many times they would tell you they did not have the book because they were not going to give it to a young person. And I'm talking young by 20 years old, 21 years old when I was doing this. So I was quite excited when one of the bookstores that was a chain actually had one of our books. I was like, oh my God, they got a section, and I buried myself in that section. You have to understand many of the laws out there still on the books do require us, like I can't do fortune telling in Harford County, Maryland. It is on the books. I'm not allowed to. Barnes and Noble actually asked a bunch of us to come up Halloween and do it. And a sheriff came up. Someone called the sheriff department on us. Isn't that scary? And he sat there and we could not exchange money. We could do it, but we could not exchange money. But we worked out a system and we got it anyway because Pam is an accountant and Pam knows how to do that stuff legally. So I made sure my girls got paid. You're not going to do that to my girls. But having it in a section where people don't feel marked or ostracized for walking and looking at it. There are many, many people out there who are starting to get disillusioned. We know now that witchcraft, Wicca, the old ways are one of the fastest growing paths here lately. Standard religion is not cutting it. And unfortunately for some, they are looking and not finding. There's a lot of get rich quick schemes on the internet. Send us $200 and we'll make you a witch in 5 minutes. Then we have some more legitimate ones. But I think with everything too that's going on, I was just speaking earlier offline that I've noticed there are more and more of my Christian friends are asking for candles lit and asking for, how do they put it? Like your prayers that you do type thing. More requests for Reiki healing, of which to me is opening up a dialogue. When you ask me a question about what I do, you've let down some barriers. So I'm going to be as best I can be at answering your questions, because now you're open, and an open mind is like an open field. It's something beautiful to behold. So I am very much in favor of them moving it to self-transformation, is what it really and truly is. I would like to see us in the religious section right along with the Book of Mormon and the Book of Lutheran, the Catholic Bible, the Tarot, the Torah, the Talmud. Let's put us in where we need to be. But for right now, every step for me is like a mile for most people, because I've been there where I was crucified just about for being my religion. I've lost jobs. I've lost places to live. It's been a struggle for 50 years. I mean, I've been doing this for over 50 years, so you can imagine 50 years ago what it was like. But now we're mainstreaming, and this is like the most awesome time for us. This is a time to let us shine, but it's also a time where we need to watch the wannabes and the other characters that are out there. But for most witches, this is awesome. This is really cool.
Yeah.
So I just caution all you witches out there, if you don't know it, tell them you don't know it, but you got to look it up, because not everybody knows all about their religion. Trust and believe.
That's very much true. And speaking of religions, the ever moving We Rise Temple, we have our Lammas full moon ritual tonight. Yay! 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 And our Lord Jason, he's going to be doing that. Also, following this week, we're going to have the Red Tent, and Miss Pam is hosting that. So, Miss Pam, tell us about the Red Tent.
All right, Red Tent. This was a tradition I didn't know that existed, but we've already done it at home. I'm from Appalachia, so you sit there and while you're popping the peas and cleaning the vegetables that you brought in for dinner that night, you talked with all the other women in your tribe, so to speak, in your family, and we learned. And I did not realize that this did not go on, because I did it with my kids. Red Tent, bring us your questions. All I ask you girls is to come in, show up, listen. If you know something, let us know. I take all questions, but just in case you're not kind of really up to verbalizing your question, we have our chat door open, so you can just type your question in. We don't say who it's from, we just answer the question, and it usually starts a really lively dialogue. It's lots of fun. It's a place to come, to learn, to live, to cry.
Yep.
And that's what Red Tent is about.
It is. It's wonderful because we just dive deep into the feminine mysteries, and we answer questions on your physical body that we know. We on your spiritual, emotional, the whole 9 yards. So, no question is off the table for us, especially with Pam.
Don't ask me a question you don't want an answer for, because I will answer it. You may be a little woed, but it will be answered. But no, really, ladies, this is a place to come. I encourage younger ladies to come to learn some stuff that maybe you don't really know about, because if your doctor tells you one thing, we can probably tell you the whys behind it. There's a few older crones that are with me, as well as some younger folks, and they do learn, and some of the younger folks are even teaching some of us old gals a few things. So please come on, join us, and have a lot of fun.
Yeah. And also on that night, the Pure Sanctuary Temple, Chad Blackman is going to be hosting a green tent for men. So we want to make sure you're aware of that as well. I'm going to be doing a webinar called Eagle Medicine. The sky isn't the limit. It's been pushed back to August the 20th. It's going to be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And basically, it's about our ancestor, our sister brother Eagle, came here to offer us guidance and encouragement and a spiritual foundation to ease our minds through the period of this massive rapid transformation that we're having. And so come and learn the Eagle's medicine and how it can provide knowledge to guide you through this period. So Pam, I think it's time that we introduce our guest host. He is one of the pagan leaders. This guest host considers himself a modern Renaissance man. In 1962, he was the co-founder of the Church of All Worlds, along with his beloved late wife, Morning Glory. He raised unicorns, and they were featured in the Barnum and Bailey Circus. He created and was the original editor for the Green Egg magazine that has recently resurrected in the last few years. And a self-claimed wizard, this guest host founded and is the current headmaster of the Gray School of Wizardry. He has written numerous books, including the Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard, and as an artist and sculptor, his images and statues are known throughout the world. He travels and teaches at various festivals, including Witches Fest, PantheaCon, and Starwood. And it is my pleasure to introduce our guest host, my friend, Oberon Zell. How are you doing, Oberon?
I'm doing good, Nikki. Good to see you here.
Good to see you, hon. So let us know what has been going on in your life currently.
Oh my goodness, currently. Well, currently, immediately, I recently located myself, relocated after numerous moves and travels over the past few years. I'm now at a place called the Longhouse, which is about 30 miles east of Seattle, Washington. That's where I am right now. And it's a wonderful place, and I hope this to be my permanent home. So I'm getting settled in. I've just only been here a couple of months, and really loving it. Absolutely fabulous. It's a pagan retreat center and facility of 89 acres altogether, and with all kinds of temples and shrines and Stonehenge and oh, it's just wonderful place, absolutely wonderful place. And right now, of course, everything is all shut down. So this is a really good time. We're regrouping and redeveloping our infrastructure and just getting prepared for when we can basically have people here again and have events. This place has hosted events of up to 500 people over the last decades. It's been about 40 years or so, I guess, that this place has been going strong. And now I'm a part of it.
Awesome, awesome. So back in the 80s, you raised unicorns. Could you kind of tell us about that and about Lancelot?
Yes. Well, sure. That's a fun story. When Morning Glory and I first got together, we met in 73 and we were handfasted in 74. And early on, some of the many things that we discovered we shared was a love of mythological creatures and beasties and mysterious unknown stuff like that. And we decided right around that time, the movie The Last Unicorn came out. And we had read the book and we loved the movie. And in it, there's a circus kind of run by a witch named Mimi Fortuna. And it's a circus, a traveling menagerie of mythical beasties called Creatures of Night Brought to Light. And we thought, wow, that would be a great name for a book, a book about the true stories behind all the mythical creatures. So we started doing research, and shortly after that, we hit the road and traveled. We got an old school bus and fixed it up and rebuilt it into a travel home, which was a lot of fun to do, and travel all over the country. And did research in libraries, of course, because there was no internet, there was no Wikipedia, and there was no Google or anything like that. If you wanted to find out stuff, you had to actually go to libraries. And so we did. And in the process of our research, we discovered the secret of the unicorn, that unicorns were not actually creatures of fantasy. They were real live animals that were produced by an ancient lost secret, an art form. Actually, they're an art form. But that secret had been lost and rediscovered numerous times throughout history. The original unicorns go back 4,000 years, and they were taurine bull unicorns that are depicted in ancient bas reliefs and stuff as fighting lions, because that's what they were developed for. They are defenders of the herd against predators, because they are lethal. They are phenomenally dangerous because they charge horn first with like a lancer, like a jousting, whatever, and nothing can withstand that. So, but you can only have one in a herd, because they will fight with each other, because they have to be males, and they will fight for domination with the other males, and one will kill all the others, and that's what happens. So you can only have one in the herd, but it's a great protection. So anyway, the first ones appeared during the Bronze Age over 4,000 years ago, and then when that came to an end about 3,600 years ago, the secret was lost, and all that remained were these images that people had all over the place, and these legends of these amazing one-horned creatures. And then it was rediscovered numerous times throughout history. I'm not going to give all the accounts, but they're really quite famous. The Golden Age of Greece, the birth of Confucius, the cessation of Genghis Khan's conquest, all of these things were affected by the appearance of actual unicorns at that particular time. So we rediscovered this, and we rediscovered again the technique by which these were created. And it was a fascinating story. And we thought, well, this will be a great chapter in the book. Or maybe we could do this ourselves. Well, we talked to some friends, and one of our friends had just acquired some property, a big 220 acre parcel of land up in Mendocino County, California, part of a larger hippie community that was founded in 1972. And she invited us to move up there and be caretakers of the land and raise unicorns. And so that's what we did. And it was successful. In 1980, the first unicorns were born. And we took them out into the world, and we did Renaissance fairs for a number of years. We did every Renaissance fair in North America, traveled all over the place, and eventually our booking agent managed to swing an exhibition deal with the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus for a 4-year expedition run. And they made them phenomenally famous. They said that these were the most famous and most successful exotic animal thing they had ever had in the entire history of the circus. And there have been documentaries on this and all kinds of stuff. The amazing thing is that now these, 35 years later or something like that, the world has completely forgotten. I mean, this was huge at the time. We were in every newspaper, where every TV show, we traveled all over the place, every Ren fair. It was big, it was huge. And yet today, nobody remembers except a handful of people. But you talk about unicorns today, and they're back to being mythical creatures, and people use it as a metaphor for non-existent mythical things. And it's quite amazing. It's a lesson, because, of course, the same thing of things disappearing into myth applies to witches and wizards as well. We also became mythical creatures, and it's fascinating how that works. So it was quite a lesson, quite an adventure, one of the really great ones. And right now, we've got our agent, who's still around, Jeffrey Siegel, is doing a traveling show, a tour of the unicorn story with the skull of a unicorn. So that's kind of neat. And we're really hoping, I'm hoping anyway, that eventually I can sell that skull for enough money to do some wonderful things for the next adventure. So I'm looking for somebody with too much money who would like to have a genuine unicorn skull in their collection of oddities. So perhaps somebody will see that. Anyway, there's documentaries and films and all kinds of stuff on this. If you go to my personal website, oberonzell.com, you can find out more about it. There's links and things like that. So there you go.
That is really awesome, Oberon. We were talking earlier before we went on air. I teach one of your pieces, is one of my readings for my students. It's We Are the Other People. Corellians have a Corellian Casual Friday, 9:00 Eastern Standard Time on Zoom. And it just happened to come up because some of us oldsters were talking about it. And We had a few young ones on there that were like, what are you talking about? We're like, oh my goodness. I said, you got to talk to your mentor. I'm really mad that they don't require this. But it's an interesting piece. And again, it's gone, it's disappeared, but we're going to revive it. And how did you come up with that piece? I've always wanted to ask you that.
Well, We Are the Other People came out of really a lifelong of interest. When I was a kid, my very first reading were children's versions of the Greek myths. So I was deeply embedded in mythology, world mythology, long before I was old enough to be sent off to Sunday school and learn the Christian myth. But to me, that was just another myth, another story, another creation story to go along with all the others. And I find creation myths fascinating. All peoples have come up with their idea of how the things began, how the gods created the world and creatures and people and all. And some of them are wonderful stories, but they're always unique to the people because they are always the stories about how we came about, us being the people, because every people's name for themselves is simply the people. So I accepted it the same way. When I learned the Christian mythos, I realized that, well, this is the Jewish story, creation story, of how the Jewish people attribute their origin and ancestry. But I was not actually Jewish myself, so I tended to feel I just kind of put it in the category with other myths. Myself, my heritage is Celtic and Nordic, so those also fascinate me. But really, my favorites have been the Greek myths because they're the best stories. They really are good stories. And but I assimilated all that stuff. I studied it. I read it in depth. I just never accepted it as my tradition, because I wasn't part of that heritage, that lineage, which it's very specific about. And throughout the Bible, especially in Genesis and Old Testament references, there's this constant emphasis that this is about, I am your God, you are my people, is the contract between Yahweh and the chosen people, and everybody has that. Every people has that kind of an arrangement with their gods. But the people who are not the chosen people, as it were, of this particular deity, are constantly referenced as those other people. Don't be like those other people. Don't be like those pagans. Don't do that what they do. You're my people. You got to do my thing. Here's the rules, so on and so on. And right off the bat, it even starts off with the first creation myth that says the gods created people, men and women, in the image of the gods. They created them. And the word for gods is Elohim. It's a plural word. It means the pantheon or the gods. It's not a single entity. It's a plural term. And that's how it starts off, male and female in the image of the gods. This is not a singular notion. And then it says later on that Yahweh, one of the gods, it says Yahweh God, made a garden in Eden, which we now know exactly where that was. That was the now underwater of the Persian Gulf. But the Persian Gulf was the first place on earth that where planting occurred. Agriculture began there. And it says specifically in the account, it says the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and two other rivers, the Gihon and what did I forget? Anyway, there's four rivers that all come together right there, and that spot is known. It's right at the head of the Persian Gulf, so it's very specific where it was. The Sumerians called it Dilmun, and it comes up in other legends and stories. And it was submerged eventually as by the rising seawaters. And and then the story says that in this particular garden, he put the first man, and he made, he did this bizarre thing about creating a woman out of the guy's rib and all that weird stuff. But it's very significant that this is a unique thing. This is not the origin of all humans. All humanity was created previously by the gods, which works out fine. But this was just Yahweh's particular little experiment. So then the whole thing proceeds, and there's the whole story of the temptation where Yahweh says, you can eat of anything in the garden is all yours to eat except for this one tree. Don't eat of that tree, because if you eat of that, on that day you eat of that fruit, on that day you shall surely die. He says this, then he goes away. And so, the woman, Eve, is wandering around the garden, and she encounters a serpent. And the serpent says, So did Yahweh say you could eat any of the stuff? And she says, yeah, we can eat anything except the fruit of that one tree, because that Yahweh says that's poisonous, and we eat on that, we will die immediately on that day. And the serpent says, well, that's not true. Actually, Yahweh lied. Actually, that is the tree of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. And if you eat of that tree, your eyes will be opened and you'll become as gods with divine knowledge. And that's it. Just after that, the snake goes away. That's his only line. And so Eve thinks, wow, that sounds kind of interesting. Maybe I should check this out. So she takes a bite and she goes, wow, look at the colors, man. You know, ooh. And she says to her husband, she says, hey, you got to try some of this. This is pretty good. So he eats some too, and they go, wow. And everything changes. And then later, Yahweh comes down and has this little encounter with him and says, what have you done? You've eaten of this stuff. I told you not to. Why he put the tree there if he didn't want him to eat of it is a little dubious. But then he goes back to the other gods. And this is very specific. He goes back to the other gods and he says, well, the people have eaten from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And now they're like us, knowing good from evil. And we got to kick them out of the garden, because the next thing they'll do is to take from the tree of life and live forever and become immortal. We can't have that, because then they'd be just as good as we are. So the other gods go, okay, it's your experiment. You do what you want. He throws them out. All this is in there. It's all in the story. It's all just like that. And so they go out, and then there's the whole thing with Cain and Abel, which is a rather bizarre story, that they each grow up, and they Cain becomes a farmer, and Abel raises sheep, I think it was, livestock anyway. And comes the harvest time, and they each make a sacrifice, and Yahweh accepts the sacrifice of the live animal sacrifice. That's cool by Yahweh, but he rejects the sacrifice of the fruits and vegetables, not interested in that veggie stuff. And so, Cain is pretty miffed by this. And he says, well, if it's blood you want, I'll give you blood. And he kills his brother, which was uncool. And so then he gets thrown out, and he goes off and he marries a woman from another village. It says that. He goes off to the land of Nod and marries a woman there and begins a new life. So it's very clear and specified in the Bible that there's other people, around, and they have other things going on. Well, that's us. You see, if you're not part of the lineage of a line of Adam and Eve, then you're the other people by definition. So for some reason, most people who read the Bible, especially Christians, don't seem to realize that. They somehow think that everybody are the descendants of Adam and Eve, but it's very specific in saying that is not the case. And there's this constant recurring references, don't be like those other people. Well, I thought about this a lot over the years. Of course, I moved on into adopting the heritage of my own ancestral lines and those of many others, and when I discovered the word, became a pagan. I was the first person, in fact, to claim that term. On September 7th of 1967, I was the first person on record to claim the identity of pagan. And then I started spreading the word. I would run into other people who were following ancient traditions like Greek or Egyptian or Norse or whatever it was, Celtic, Druidic, anything. And I'd say, hey, I think you guys sound like pagans. We're pagans. Let's all be pagans together, la-di-da. And as we started the first pagan communication systems and networks and alliances, the Council of Themis was the very first pagan alliance. And more people showed up. They said, yeah, pagans, we're all pagans. And right now, paganism is the second largest religion in America, officially recognized in the surveys at over 4 million people today, and officially regarded as that. And the estimates by the people doing the surveys, the numbers are probably much greater, because a lot of people do not necessarily say what they are or give honest answers. And then you've got all these people wanting to be something else on the side, like heathens or polytheists or something, who are actually pagans, but they just don't want to be counted exactly. So, but we got at least 4 million of us who are willing to say that and count up. And that's pretty impressive. The second largest religion in America and growing throughout the world as more and more people are claiming their traditional heritages. So over the years, we would get the knock on the door, and we'd get the morons or the obvious witlesses or somebody like that. And they would come and they would want to, tell us their story, about their thing. And I would always invite them in because I enjoyed the theological conversations. I'm always interested to see, well, let's talk about this stuff. And eventually I kind of developed this whole rap. I picked out the Bible quotes and I selected stuff, and I would give the kind of rap I just did here in various forms. And the culmination came in the episode that is recorded in that little story that I wrote up. It was where one morning, after a particularly delightful festival with a house full of people who spent the night, the knock on the door comes and the Yahweh's witnesses show up, and I invite them in and I present this. Okay, I've got it now. I've got it all down. Here it is. Laid it all out to them. And in the written version of the story that doesn't show up in the comic strip version, I gave a phrase that may be the one reason why this particular pamphlet or this writing may continue to be my most famous contribution to literature. I described Morning Glory coming out from and I said that they looked like she'd set titties on stun because, of course, she wasn't wearing any clothes at that particular moment. And I think that phrase, set titties on stun, has become quite a famous one and ensured the perpetuation of this particular writing. It did not get into the cartoon version, which is okay. It was in the original draft, the pencil draft, which I still have, that Don Lewis drew for it. But he decided to make this more of a conventional sort of a tract. But they didn't know how to answer it. They were stumped. So they said, well, we don't know how to say this. We will go back to our elders and ask them. And I said, you do that. And I want you to come back and tell me what they say, because I'm dying to know. Okay, what's the answer to this? Never heard from them again. Until a year later, when I got a phone call from one of those guys. And he said, I felt I had to call you back because I promised I would. And I feel that I have this commitment that I have to live up to. I promised I would call you, but I had to tell you I had to leave the church. And it just tore my faith, that little conversation. He said, I went back and I told the elders what you said, and I showed them the Bible verses, and I asked them for an explanation what I could say. And what they told me was, don't go back there. And I said, but what about this? And he said, don't go back there. That's it. He never gave an explanation. And he said, I couldn't deal with it. I could not. It just shattered my faith. And I kind of felt sorry for the guy because it wasn't like he was going to become a pagan or anything. I mean, this was his faith, but I kind of figured, well, I didn't go and knock on his door and say, have you heard the word of the lady? Can I tell you about our 4 watchtowers or anything like that? Enter in freely and of your own risk, in fact, is what I said when they knocked on the door. I gave that invitation,
You had that as a sign.
So that's the story of that. That's how it's about.
Yeah, I remember you had that as a sign, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
I remember that. So you were a co-founder of the Church of All Worlds. So how did that come about? Yes. And what obstacles did you face, and how did you overcome them?
Well, that, of course, is a fascinating and somewhat legendary story in pagan history. I grew up, as did many of us in those days, as kind of an ugly duckling. I didn't know there was anybody else like me anywhere that thought like I did about anything. I was kind of isolated, The story you get all the time, the ugly duckling, the Harry Potters, the changelings, who obviously don't seem to be a part of the families that they are born into. I used to go out in the backyard with a flashlight to try to signal the flying saucers to come and take me home, And I've talked to other people who felt the same way. It was a fairly common feeling that we were mutants or changelings or somehow. And I didn't find anybody else like me until I went to college. And in the very first days there, I met a guy named Lance Christie, who also was a fellow ugly duckling. Well, and we bonded instantly. We stayed up late at night talking about all this kind of stuff. We had grown up on science fiction and fantasy and world mythology, and we were smart, and we were both in the psychology department. And finally, we had somebody we could talk to. It was a big deal for us. Well, we had both grown up. This was 1961. We had grown up in the 50s, going to high school in the 50s, just like in all the stories and movies in Pleasantville and Happy Days and Archie and all that stuff. It was that was it. That was high school in the 50s, just like that. And what kept us going through that time were science fiction novels, juvenile novels, which were sort of the Harry Potter novels of our day, because one came out every year, written by Robert Heinlein. And there was a whole series of 12 of them altogether called Heinlein's Juveniles. And they were lessons, much like the Harry Potter books for the recent generation, on how to become a human being, how to become fully human. And of course, using science fiction, you can do in comparison to what? So you can do that. What does it mean to be human as opposed to anything else? And they're wonderful stories. They still are. They're great stories. I recommend anybody to read them, kids as well as adults. But we were there when they were coming out. We waited for the next one, The Librarian, and I was always had a thing about librarians, the idea of a brilliant, intelligent woman with big glasses and the bit, I fell for that completely. That's my idea of the ideal woman. Anyway, The Librarian would set aside, when the new copy came in, she'd set it aside for me. And when I'd show up, is there a new one out yet? She'd, it just arrived, here you are. And I would be the first one to get it. Lance was the same way. Well, in 1961, the culmination of the entire series came out in a book called Stranger in a Strange Land. I mean, the very title spoke to us, because that's how we all felt, strangers in a strange land. And it was a brilliant story, absolutely brilliant, an earth-shaking story of the first human expedition to Mars is a disaster. It crashes, everybody is killed. But one of the women had gotten pregnant on the journey, and in the crash, an ancient Martian race that nobody knew about, who lived underground, discover the crash, and they discover the unborn baby and are able to save and raise this child in their own culture. Sort of like we go to the jungle and get a baby chimpanzee and bring it back and raise it up and teach it hand language and how to make things and wear clothes and whatever we do. And this was the story. So they raised this kid up. And 20 years later, another expedition from Earth manages to make it, this time successfully. And they have, by this time, found out, they've learned that Mars is actually inhabited and that there are, beings there. And it's beginning. So they have a whole expedition is full of experts in all the world's cultures and religions, because they all want to go and interact with this newly discovered race. And they find this kid. He's now grown up, of course, and they bring him back to Earth, a world he's never seen. And on the journey back, they're all interacting with him and learning what he knows, and he's trying to learn about Earth culture and all this stuff. And they get back, and he encounters the world that is his ancestral heritage, but he's looking at it from the outside, from a totally different perspective. And so is the reader, because by this time, the way the story is structured, the reader becomes one of the companions of this remarkable person. Valentine Michael Smith, is his name that they give him. And so you see the world through his eyes. You see all of our institutions. And for the first time, science fiction, we're looking at things like religion and sex and theology and politics. Nobody ever talked about that in science fiction novels before. But this introduces those in a whole new perspective, radical perspective. I mean, things like, ritual nudity and polyamory and stuff like that are introduced. Immanent divinity, thou art goddess, priestesses. There are no priestesses except in pagan religions. It's a pagan thing, priestesses, and lots of stuff like that. It's really quite profound, very important. And the central symbol of the whole thing, the central rite, is water. The sharing of water is the essence, of course, because water being somewhat rare on Mars, it's a precious thing. It's the essence of life. All living beings run by water. So to share water is to share life. So the ceremony of sharing water is central to the whole thing. And in the process, the concept of the process of the story, the concept is introduced that religion, and this is a quote, is a null area in the law. Because in America, at least, we have freedom of religion, and the First Amendment says that no law shall be restricting the free exercise of religion. So if you can establish a religion, you can pretty much do whatever you want, as long as you're not like, doing crimes. But I mean, otherwise, you're okay. So they found a religion in the story called the Church of All Worlds, because it's meant to be inclusive, not only of Earth and Mars, but also of all the different religious traditions that have been woven into the story as it goes on. And then this prescription is laid out on how to do this. So Lance and I looked at that, and we read the book, and we went, wow, we could do that. And so we shared water on April 7th of 1968 and began this, got to turn it off there, began the new church, the Church of All Worlds, with the first Water Brotherhood. And after several years of it being a kind of an underground secret society where we'd encounter other people that we thought were cool, we'd give them the book, if they liked it, we'd share water with them. And it grew to about 100 people by the time we graduated. And then afterwards, we all went off and dispersed to graduate school on our subsequent lives. And we discussed via newsletters that we kept going. What next? Should we continue just being this secret society, kind of underground and beneath the surface? Or should we go public and reveal ourselves to the world? And it was quite a debate. The majority of people really wanted to just keep it on the down low because they didn't want to get into trouble. They didn't want to face persecution. They just wanted to do the thing. And there was a prescription for that in another book by Robert Rimmer called The Herod Experiment, of becoming a little secret society, moving to a low populated state and influencing things from behind the scenes. But then there was those of us, myself particularly, who felt that, well, it was really important for us to discover, me especially, that we're not alone. And maybe what we need to do is put the flag up the flagpole and say, hey, here we are. If you're out there and you may be one of us, come on over. So we decided to do both. And Lance was chosen to head up the underground thing, which became the Atlan Foundation. And eventually, the Atl is the name of our Water Brotherhood because it means water. It's an Aztec word for water. So the Atlan Foundation eventually became the Association for the Tree of Life, which it presently is. Eventually, it became incorporated as that. And Lance headed it up through his whole life. He died, unfortunately, 10 years ago of pancreatic cancer. But I was selected to head up the other side of it, which became, of course, public as the Church of All Worlds on Labor Day weekend of 1967. And Lance and I were Kirk and Spock to each other. That was our relationship. Star Trek premiered in 1966, and so we really identified with those characters. Me being, well, obviously being the Kirk part of that equation. But it was a wonderful partnership and best friends and team for all of our lives together. And we maintained that. And the Atlan people went off and did their amazing stuff that they did that were extremely influential in various ways. But that's another story. And I went off to go public with the Church of All Worlds and bring it out. And so the very first time I did a talk about this, I was invited to talk about it. Somebody asked, what kind of a church are you? Are you some Christian sect? Are you one of these Eastern sects? Because there were all kinds of, in those days, churches coming out. You were Moonies and Scientologists and Krishna people and everybody. All these guys were popping out. And they were mostly cults of one sort or another, and they had an identity, And so when I was asked, I said, well, I guess you could say we're pagans. And that was the first time anybody ever claimed that identity, to say we're pagans, because pagans had always been a word that was used against other people. Oh, those damn pagans, don't be like those pagans. Though we got to send the missionaries off to save the pagans, or go to Africa, save the pagan babies, that kind of thing. It was always somebody else, but nobody ever claimed to be pagan until I did. And now there's over 4 million of us in this country, and it's a huge growing movement worldwide. And it's been regarded as the fastest growing religion in the Western world for many years, and it's now taking off everywhere. And I'm pretty tickled about it, because I started it. So that's the story there, how it all began.
That is really awesome. I have to admit, my first sci-fi book was the Foundation trilogy by Isaac Asimov and Heinlein, Herbert. I had them all. I was hooked probably in the 60s because Star Trek, let me tell you, sorry, I'm a girl. I had my heart set on Chekhov. Okay. Just putting it out there. He was my heartthrob. Okay. I had to have that man. I'm sure he's spinning in his grave now after that statement. Okay, now it's time for our music interlude. It's time for our song of the week. And as many of you are aware, the coronavirus 19 epidemic and pagan musicians, they really, really depend on getting out into the groups, into the festivals, touching skin. They are not able to do that now. So in order to help them along and to just give our brothers and sisters on the musical side of paganism a little help, each week, Nikki and I select a song from a pagan musician or a band and display their musical talents. We're proud this week to introduce a song from an upcoming guest and host in November. So guys, keep this on your calendar in November. From her album, Goddess Kissed, the song The Difference by Mama Gina.
Mama Gina, right.
Sacred fires high and the hearth burns low. Fire lights my soul no matter where I go. We all share a single spark, and I've learned to love the flame, and that has made all the difference. Holy rain falls and fills my glass. She washes me clean, present, future, and past. The river takes us all, and I've learned to ebb and flow, and that has made all the difference. Imagination flies and clouds drift on. Blessed air moves me with the sweetest song. We all feel this vibration, and I have listened to my muse, and that has made all the difference. Stones beneath my feet, the paper ahead. Lay my body down, rest my heavy head. Gravity has claimed me, and I'm learning to be still, and that has made all the difference. And the sky peeled back, revealed the stars against the black, reminding me I am not alone. I found my star right next to where you are, and that has made all the difference. Autumn sky and the sunset in the west. I'm feeling goddess kissed and doubly blessed. My road's no different than another, but I learned to find the joy, and that has made all the difference. That has made all the difference. That has made all the difference. Hi, yeah, yeah.
now back to Witch Hat Chats, presented by the Ever Moving We Rise Temple, the Laughing Soul Holistic Center, and Moonlight Potions and Charms. I am your host, Nikki Kirby, and Pamela Griffin is your co-host, and we are with Oberon Zell.
Okay, Oberon, another good question. Believe it or not, I was one of your students at the School of Wizardry. Can you give us a little bit more insight on that? I was actually a student. I really enjoyed my time there. I loved it. Can you give us some insight onto that?
Well, back in the day, as I mentioned before, the early 60s, when we were all in college and starting this stuff off, I was equally interested in education as I was in religion. And in fact, I took every course that was available in child development and education, as well as all the courses in comparative religion and natural history and pretty much everything. When I graduated, actually, they told me that I had carried more classes than any other student in the history of the college, because I just wanted to learn everything I could while I was there. So I just packed my schedule every year to all the way to the brim. And I had in mind wanting to start a school as well. I was involved in the early Montessori system. My first wife was the first American teacher to be trained in America in the very beginning of the Montessori system when it was first imported. And our kid was brought up in the Montessori school. And I went on to work with Head Start, and eventually I taught grade school and in the less desirable part of St. Louis for many years. And then I went on and did many teaching things. I always had in mind wanting to create a school as well as a church. But at that time, many really wonderful ones were actually being created. There was the Waldorf system and the Montessori system and Summerhill, and a lot of work was being done. But I wasn't, and so I thought, well, these guys are doing okay. I got my own ideas, because I mentioned how Stranger in a Strange Land influenced us to start a new religion. Well, I was equally inspired by another fictional event of that time, and that was a school called Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Some of you may recall that. That is the name of the X-Men school. And I wanted to teach in that school. I wanted to be Professor Xavier too. So I was really torn between starting a new church or starting a new school. And we discussed this at great length. And we felt that it was much more urgent at that time for a new religion to be established, because that seemed to be, not that there weren't lots of them, but none of them were anything I wanted to have anything to do with. They were all cults, and we had something very different in mind. The schools that were happening seemed pretty okay. But I kept that in the back burner. It's my mind. I got a teacher's certificate. I went through the process. I taught, as I mentioned, all the way up through college teaching, eventually even teaching college classes. And eventually, the time became right for that. The Church of All Worlds was well established. There had been an episode, shall we say, where I was not involved for a few years. And I was kind of, well, now what? So I said, well, this is a good time to start writing books. So I started doing that. But what was the pivotal moment at that time was the first Harry Potter movie that came out. And Morning Glory and I were invited by a Jewish shul on the south side of San Francisco to come and give a talk to the whole school and the teachers and the parents, because they had bought out the entire balcony for the opening night of the first Harry Potter movie, that they all wanted to go. But they wanted to have a conversation, shall we say, with a genuine witch and wizard who could explain this stuff in a way that would make it be not scary, because a lot of people were putting out the idea, well, this is promoting Satanism and evil stuff, And so somehow or other, they were looking around for a real witch and a real wizard, and they came upon Morning Glory and me, and they invited us down, and we showed up in our full regalia, as is this, and brought a bunch of props, and we had a great talk, and we did the whole thing with them, and everybody loved it. I remember one little kid said, well, can you be Jewish and be a wizard? And I said, well, Solomon was regarded as one of the greatest wizards of all time. And as I recall, he was Jewish. So I think you can do this, and everybody was pleased with that. And it was cool. It was really great. We got a great reception. It was all very positive. And then it was time to go to the movie. So we all showed up, and we're there in our full regalia and pointy hats and all. Pointy hats are us, right? And I'm looking around, and the whole thing is full of short pointy hats, with all these kids who were there with their pointy hats, and we got the balcony, and I'm sitting there watching this really cool movie and really digging it because I hadn't read the books or anything. I didn't really know much about it, but we watched the movie, and all down below, I'm looking at the sea of young people, kids, and thinking, wow, some of these kids are going to want to go looking for the real thing, because uniquely among all fantasy stories of magic and witchcraft, which all take place somewhere else, somewhere over the rainbow, through the magic wardrobe, in a lost land far away, ancient times, somewhere you can't get there from here, except this one. This story says that in this contemporary world, there's witches and wizards, and you just might not notice them, but you may pass them on the street, and they have their gatherings and their places they go and hang out at, even places where they shop for cool stuff. Well, that's true. And we are those people, and we really do exist, and we really do these cool things and really have these deep places. And some of these kids are going to want to come looking for it. And we're out there. And there's now occult stores everywhere. All they got to do is walk in, and there'll be a bulletin board that will say, okay, we're having a classes or a Sabbath meeting or something. Except that if they're under 18, they're not going to be allowed in, because that was the rule going on. You couldn't be in, you couldn't come if you're under 18 and all that stuff. So we said, well, what are we going to do for these guys? And it occurred to us that, well, the first thing you do when you set your foot on the magical path is you establish an altar. You have to have an altar. And we make altar figurines. That's what we were doing. We're making all these gods and goddesses altar figurines. So we got to make some for kids. So we did. I designed a kid version, God and Goddess, a young Diana and a young Pan figure in Disney style and pretty colors, painted up nice. And we took them to the International New Age Trade Show, which we did every summer, had been for years in Denver. And while we were there, a friend of mine, Trish Telesco, who's a really prolific author. At that time, she'd written over 60 books, and she herself didn't remember how many, and that was 20 years ago. She's probably written quite a lot more now. And they're all good. All the ones I've read are fabulous. I highly recommend her stuff. She was there because her publisher had brought her then because she had a new book, and they were having a book release party. So she said to me, so, Oberon, when are you going to write your book? I said, well, I've been too busy. I've got a magazine. I'm doing all this other stuff and the things and very busy. She said, let me introduce you to my publisher. So she took me over, introduced me to the publisher, said glowing things about how, you got to get this guy to write for you. He's got to get him to write a book. So the publisher sat me down and she said, all right, if you're going to write a book for us, what would it be? And I had not thought about it. I had not given a thought to writing a book at this time. But I said, well, if I was going to write a book, I'd like to write a kind of a basic Boy Scout handbook kind of a thing for wizards. The book that if you're starting on the path, this is the book you should have. It would be your fundamental book that everything you need to know. It's the one that I would want to have when I turned 11, that I have been given this book. It's the book that everybody should get. It'd be a foundational textbook for Hogwarts, that kind of thing. She said, great. Sounds like a great idea. Send us a proposal. So I did, and they accepted it. And I reached out to other people I knew in the magical community who had been publishing their stuff for years in Green Egg. So I knew all these people, all these authors and teachers and stuff. And we agreed that it was time to convene the Grey Council, the legendary council of sages and mages and witches and wizards that you see in all the stories. So we did. And I gave them an assignment. I said, I want us to write a basic guide, a basic handbook that will be the book that each of us wish we could have gotten when we started on the path, and the book that we want to get in our next incarnation when we become 11. We want to have this be given to us as a coming of age gift. And that's the assignment. And they said, yeah, that's really cool. So we did. And that was the book, The Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard. Well, as we were writing it, and there it is, you see, The Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard, my first book, which came out in 2004. And at the time, at the final thing, I said, well, this is just a basic book, but there should be, we want to refer the readers to going to some online school, maybe where they can learn more and pick it up. Because I'd heard that there were a number of online schools, although I hadn't really been directly involved with any of them. So I did a little research and I discovered that none of them were available. All of them were religious schools. They were all teaching a particular religion, mostly witchcraft, but some branch of it, like the Corellians with the witch school and various others. And I didn't want to do that. Wizardry is not a religion. It's like, being a wizard is like being a professor or a teacher or a doctor. It's a calling, but it's not a religion. Witchcraft is more of a religion, although not always. Many witches are other religions in witchcraft is a craft, as it used to be. But in any case, I certainly didn't want to present wizardry as a religion, and I wasn't trying to recruit my readers into any funny religion, including my own. I got my own funny religion. That's okay, but I'm not trying to drag people into it. We don't do that. It's a thing with us pagans. We really are against prostitution. So we don't do it. And so that was a limit. And also, none of them were for kids. They were all for adults. You had to be 18 to go to the school. And most of them were very expensive. And I didn't want to do that either. So I've had a thing in my life, the Mission Impossible thing. I get these phone calls. This is the goddess speaking. Your next assignment, should you choose to accept it. And you know how it works, with this thing. You don't get to say, no, thanks, I'll just sit this one out. Because if you do that, then they just cancel your show. Your show is canceled. They don't want to watch you sitting on your ass. They want you to go out and do this assignment so they can be entertained. That's the whole thing. And come along for the ride, and all that stuff. We know how that works with the gods. You throw a party, you invite them, you got to make sure they have a good time. And so this was an assignment. I got this message. Okay, now you've written the book. Now the textbook. Now you've got to create the school for the textbook to be for. So I started talking that up, and the members of the Great Council were interested, and so they became the advisory board and many of the early faculty, and we launched the Great School of Wizardry. Ta-da! Quite spectacular. With all kinds I came up with all kinds of ideas what I wanted. I had absolutely no idea it was possible because I didn't do web work, but I talked to people who did, and they said, "Oh, we can do that. Yeah, sure, we can make that happen. We'll do this," and so on. And they actually did it and put together exactly what I wanted. And on August 1st, exactly right today, right now, Lunasad of 2004, we opened our virtual doors expecting a bunch of teenagers. We were utterly unprepared for what happened. The flood of new applicants who came in, who had read the book and were waiting for this to happen, were mostly adults. 3/4 of them were adults. So we had to retool immediately and regather and go for, higher level, more sophisticated, adult-oriented program while still keeping it open for kids. I mean, that was the initial purpose. So we maintained that, but we had to do all the new adult program, which was fabulous. And we got awesome teachers and amazing students. And the school's been going strong ever since. It's been quite an adventure. And I'm so delighted to have, some of our students. Why don't you say a few words about how the school occurred to you and the book? What do you think?
Okay, I've been on the
Go on,
path for
Pam.
a long time and was just looking, just being nosy to see what was out there. I'm a new age, I go right to the new age section, and I saw the book and I thought, I've never seen anything for a wizard before. And the Harry Potter thing, and I'm thinking, this is pretty cool. Everybody who was pagan at the time when I was starting out knew who Oberon Zell was. So it was like, oh, it's mine. I came home and I read it. And I thought, well, just for fun, I'm going to go on and see it. And I became a student for about 3 years. So my book is, I'm embarrassed. It is dog-eared. It has got, the edges are almost from where I have referenced it. I teach I've had students for years. I actually taught at a community college in Baltimore where they allowed me to teach a Wicca 101 course. The book came with me, of course. So it has been marked. It's got circles, it's got lines, it's got highlighter all through it. But it is a much treasured book. No one is allowed to touch this book in my house. My children knew about it growing up. They all got their own damn copies because I'm not sharing. My children were raised pagan, all three of them, two remain pagan. One chose her path, which I'm happy for her because she really loves what she does. But I'm a little embarrassed to show it because it's all creased and oh my God, it's well loved. A book that's not well used is not well loved. Mine is
That's the whole
overly loved.
idea.
Yeah, I
If
mean,
the copy isn't been beat up enough, then obviously it isn't serving its use, you know?
Yes. And this thing has been, I've written all over it. I've highlighted, you know, when I'm teaching, it's easier, you know, you highlight so you can put the eyes, you know, you're going, okay, now on this page, we're describing just like in the book, you know. So like I said, you're required reading for a lot of my students only because it is written, it is not tongue in cheek, it is not dumbed down, it is not on such a high level that you can't grasp the material. I need something that, and when we teach, as you know, from 18 to 90. So you have to have material that all of them can understand. So I loved being at the school. I thought it was the most awesome thing. My son signed up when he was young. Mommy, can I do this? I'm like, you sure can. We signed him up. Of course, he wasn't so young at the time. We both very much enjoyed it. His copy looks like my copy, which meant it got used a lot. The spines are gone on them. We've taped them, you know, that kind of stuff. He eventually bought me a new one. So when I went to teach, it didn't look so ratty. It's like, Mom, it really looks sad. You know, the duct tape holding the back spine together. He's, Mom, we really have to do a little bit better. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm still referencing it today. It's current material. The bibliography in the back with the wizards, current day, John Dees, and you know, all of our wonderful people. It's tearing here. There's another little corner tearing I'm trying to fix. It has actual references, so it's not Harry Potter. It's the real deal. And I think that makes the big difference. In the school, I took some of the younger kids' classes, and I will tell you, I enjoyed them just as much as I did the older kids' classes. The younger kids' classes were wonderfully written, captured your imagination. I've noticed most of those who walk this path still have that child. We're still in touch with our inner child. That's why these things fascinate us. And I can't say enough good about it. I loved it the whole time. I still jump back and forth occasionally and check out what's going on just because. But no, if I had, well, my grandchildren, my two oldest granddaughters who are now in their 30s, goodness gracious, they were actually students also. So it was something that, as funny as it sounds, is a pass down. Because I gave it to my kids took it, and now some of my grandchildren have taken it. And they've all, you know, it's back and forth, but it's still as a basic reference. And they're, you know, it was something we can talk about. You know, my middle grandchild just graduated high school. She's number 3 in line. I had mostly all granddaughters. I was like, what happened here? I had all witches. Emmy is pagan. And she went through your school. She is now looking at starting to become a real witch. She lives not too far from me, so it's going to be, I told her when she was 18 that she could come. That's in November, so I'm like panicking. I don't know why, but I am. But yeah, my kids enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed Harry Potter, this makes it real. This is actually the real deal. So I commend Rowling for the books. I love them. It brought us a little bit more into the public. It allowed us to come in non-judgmentally, and it allowed us to come in without someone pointing the finger going witch, and us combusting into flames. Just as Charm did, and some of the movies have done now. We're not quite so, green-faced and in the closet. But no, the book, this is one of my reading tools. If anybody asks me what books, they always ask the teacher, well, what books do you recommend? This is one of my books. Because of the reference material that's included in here. It's real reference material. It's not pie in the sky stuff. You've got Francis Barrett, you've got McGregor Matthews, Aleister Crowley, you've touched on the big names, Gerald Gardner, in the back. And that is something that is concrete to us. Like, look, here they were, here they are. So it's not one of those lovely pie in the sky Wiccan books that we see out there that have absolutely no basis in fact. So as a factual real witch, not somebody who dabbles on the weekend, I highly recommend it. And I recommend the school. I think it's a wonderful school. Nobody does anything with young people anymore. And as I say millions of times, if we don't teach our children, somebody else will. And frankly, I don't like what they're teaching out there. So, I taught my children. My children have taught their children. And now my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I have an 8-year-old, oh my God, he is starting to become interested. So it is open season. If this is what he wants, my granddaughter has said she will follow the tradition and she will teach him.
Yeah, it's just like with me, I taught at grade school for 10 years is what I did. And I enjoyed it a lot because I met a lot of very good people. We're still friends, to this day. I remember coming across my copy when I first bought it because I kept going. It was at Barnes and Noble, and I saw it, and I'm like, "What is this? A handbook. What is this?" And so I picked up the handbook and I started flipping through it, and I'm like, "Okay, this sounds interesting," but I put it back, and then I walked off. I came back to that book 3 times, and to me, when you come back to a certain book and the third time you have to buy it, it's calling you, it's telling you you have to buy this book. And I remember buying the book and reading it, and then I discovered, hey, we got an online school here, hot dog. We got a whole online school. And I remember becoming a student, and it wasn't but maybe a month or two, and I was asked to apply to become a faculty member. And I really did enjoy it. It was an amazing experience. And Oberon has actually autographed my copy. Do you remember mine? Mine, the spine is no longer there. I got pages coming out of it.
Clear tape works a lot better than duct tape.
Right. Well, the glue had come out of it is what the problem was, And so I remember I still have that. I still reference it myself. I even contributed to the companion. I remember doing that as well. So Oberon, you've been really great. You've had, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. We truly appreciate you coming on. Is there anything right quick that you want to say to our viewers?
Well, my current project and efforts are turning towards the whole 2020 Vision Awakening project. And there's a website for that, 2020 Vision Awakening, that I recommend. And you can find it if you just go to my website, which is easy. And this is the latest of a recurrence of 60-year Renaissance cycles that go all the way back to the Italian Renaissance of the 1480s. And every 60 years, like clockwork, there has been a cultural renaissance, of which the last one, of course, was the New Age of the 1960s that we touched on, where a lot of this stuff began. Each of these has a profound impact across many, many different aspects of society and culture. And here we are now at the beginning of a new one. And they are generally just totally transformative. And it's interesting, of course, that we have this concept of 2020 vision as an idea. And we talk about 2020 hindsight. And what I want to do here, and I'm working with, is a 2020 foresight vision. What do we want to envision and imagine in this coming decade, having the lessons of all the previous cultural renaissances to look back upon and the impact that they had on the world, every one of them, profound. So I'm working on that. And I'm designing some major events and ceremonies and stuff, which will have to wait until the quarantine restrictions lift, which is great because we get to do this behind the scenes until we're ready to come out, much like happened back in the 60s, that we were behind the scenes and underground for a number of years until we finally came out and burst upon the public scene. And we are doing that now. And the whole world is in a state of suspension, that kind of space you get in all the stories where before the great adventure, you have to have a vigil where you sit all night and you fast and you pray and you contemplate the journey that you're about to undertake on the next day. They all begin that way. So here we are. The entire world is placed into this space between the worlds in preparation for what comes next and giving us time to imagine and think about what comes next. And we're seeing things coming out in movies and TV shows that are very provocative and very inspirational. And so here we are. And so I'm really working with that. I'm very excited about that. And I'm in this wonderful new place now that'll provide a perfect stage, really, upon which to create this new performance, this new act to move forward in life. So I'm very pleased with the successes I've had with the previous work, the Church of All Worlds, the Pagan Movement, the Green Egg, the Unicorn Project, of course, the Gray School, my books. All of these have been very successful, and they've done exactly what I wanted them to do, and I'm very pleased. And I'm now turning my attention to the next great adventure. So there you go.
Well, thank you again, Oberon. Pam and I have had an absolute blast, talking to you and everything. This was amazing, So thank you for coming on. We truly appreciate it. You continue to make a difference in your life and others. Blessed be, hon.
Blessed be.
Thank you. Blessed be.
Okay. And now it is time for the Witches Cabinet. And Miss Pam is going to be helping us with our Witches Cabinet today. So Miss Pam, let's see what we're
doing. Hi, and welcome to the Witches Cabinet today. Today we're going to have a little talk on some essential oils and some fun we can have with them. I'm going to show you how to cut down your essential oils from massage oils all the way up to perfumes. So the first thing we want to look at is our essential oils. Again, I caution you. Essential oils are very, very strong. It can cause skin damage. So I'm going to ask you to please be very careful with them. Whether you buy them in the small quantity or you buy them, I do candles. So I tend to buy large quantities of certain scents. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you, first of all, the oil that you use. There are a ton of oils out there. Some oils have a natural scent to them. Olive oil has an olive oil scent. Now, if you're going to make an oil or a perfume, you might not want that scent. It might compete with what you're using. I actually prefer the fractured coconut oil. And the fractured coconut oil means that it's liquid. And guys, save yourself a small fortune. Don't buy them at the hobby stores. Go into the cooking aisle of your local grocery store and just pick it up. You can probably pick it up for a quarter of the price. It is exactly the same thing. As long as it says 100% coconut oil, you're good to go. The other reason I like coconut oil, one, it has no scent. Two, it is great at killing pathogens. It is also really awesome for inflammation. If you're making a massage oil, a lot of times you do want to use something for inflammation, and this is fantastic for it. It's great, effective moisturizer. As we get older, our bodies tend to lose moisture, and you're always putting hand cream on. You'll notice some of us old ladies, use tons of it. This is a great, effective moisturizer. And it's also great for healing wounds, but we'll go into that when we go into some of our healing classes. But right now, we're going to just show you how to make a very simple anointing oil. We have the charts up here. You might not be able to see them, but Nikki has been an absolute wonderful witch, and she has put these on the site so that you guys can see them too. I have them up here as a quick reference for me. we're going to make, first of all, a 1%, that's a daily facial or a hand that you're going to use every day. And what you do is you put 2 teaspoons of your oil, whatever oil you're using. Again, I use the coconut oil, into a little jar. Now you're going to think that's not much, but we'll multiply it up. But this is 2 teaspoons. Doesn't look like much. Into this wonderful little thing, you're going to put in, you're going to decide what scent you're going to use, and you're going to put in 3 drops for every 2 teaspoons. So you put your 3 drops in and you shake it up. Now this doesn't look like much, but let me tell you what happens. If you're anointing candles, you only need a touch. If you use this in anointing ceremonies in your circle, you really don't want to use anything really heavy with essential oils because you don't know, 1, if somebody's allergic to it, or 2, if it's going to break them out in some way. So you use a 1%, it's very, very light. It gives the aroma, but it doesn't really do too much damage. Now, if you want to do for your bath, you want to take a really special bath, or if you're doing a special bath for ritual, you're going to want to use a 2%. All you do is just double it and you put 6 drops in the 2 teaspoons. Now, if you have localized areas of discomfort, and this is more in the healing areas, you can use, if you're using a peppermint or a healing scent, then you can use up to 9 drops. Now, this is great too for the kids. Have the children's ones that you can make up. Anybody's got little ones know that lavender works. So if you got a little one, 3 to 24 months, you can make a 25% solution. That 25% solution is 1/4 of the 3 drops. So you got to do the math a little bit. And you can use that. That is a great scent to rub them down in before they go to bed. 1, it adds moisturizer to their skin. 2, it's a calming, it settles down. Now, if you got a 2 to 6-year-old, you know you're going to need some of this. So you're going to make it a 1% solution, the same as this, and you can rub them down. Nothing is more special than having them pick out their own scent that they want that nobody else has. Then for your older kids, 6 to 15, this is a great little project to do together. You can actually make it to 1.5%, and it's between these 2, and you can use it, and they can use it as a special moisturizer for themselves. Now, this is the fun part. Everybody wants to be an individual. Nobody wants to smell like anybody else. So we're going to make our own perfume. Get yourself some roller balls. These little containers, you can pick them up at any craft store. You can order them online on eBay, Amazon, all of them have it. Get you some. Now, you're going to make the solution. Now, this is what's fun because you're going to use 10 to 15 drops, 2 teaspoons of oil. So that means you can mix a lot of different scents. Take a piece of paper, put a couple of drops on the piece of paper. 3 drops of dragon's blood, 5 drops of sandalwood, 5 drops of black opium. Put them all into a Ziploc bag, zip it up. Let it sit for 5 minutes, open it up. See if you like that scent. Nope, got to add more dragon's blood. Me, I always have to add more dragon's blood. So that's just me, half the bottle and I'm good. So you mix it up. You have your own scent, something that is uniquely and totally yours. Now, you're going to want to write all that down again. Mark it for a year. Put the scent on it, what you used, how many drops is it. Hey, wait a minute, don't we have a book of shadows? Yeah, get your book of shadows out. Start writing in it. This could be one of your first recipes. Be your own little sandwich. Write it down for a year. This stuff only is good for a year. That's why we don't mix up a whole lot of it. Put it in a dark cabinet. I like to keep mine in a brown bottle if I have it. If I don't, I put it in the medicine cabinet. Or I have a cabinet that I use for my anointing oils for when I do my rituals. This, you can put in the refrigerator, or you can, it's really great to put in the refrigerator. Put it on, it's nice when it's cold, especially here in Florida, guys. But make sure you put the date on it that you did it, because what you want to do is after a year, you want it, as it gets closer, you start smelling it. If it smells different in any way, shape, or form, toss it. Drop it out, clean it out, and start over again. That's why you need your book of shadows, so that you can figure out what you do. And just think about it. You're walking down the street and your girlfriend's like, oh my God, that is like, oh, I gotta have it. I gotta have it. Where did you get it? And you'll say, gee, that's just a little something I mixed up in the back. Oh, really? Oh, I would love to have it. You would you? And then you start your own little perfume business, because yes, you do charge for what you do. We'll talk about that in another episode of the witch's cabinet. But for now, just have a lot of fun with this. This is something you can work with the kids on this one. This includes math skills, science skills, and it also includes some marketing skills for the older kids. How would they present it to somebody and what makes it look pretty? And advertising skills, because they are making the little labels that go on. You can buy the labels at Office Depot, Walmart, anywhere. Just make sure you put a label on it so that you know what you have. And you're going to want to make sure it's waterproof. So use those magic markers. And as you make and get more and more into this, you might even branch off like I did. I'm a candle maker. That's how I learned how to do all of this. And nothing is better than a dragon blood candle at ritual. So have a lot of fun with this. Enjoy. And we'll see you back on the next Witch's Cabinet. Back to you, Nikki.
All right. That was awesome, Pam. That was really, really awesome.
Thank you. I do apologize a little bit. I am in Florida. We are having the nice little hurricane. I believe its name is pronounced Isaac. They pronounced it 6 different ways. It's supposed to hit at 2 o'clock. We are in rain right now. So my fear was I was going to get cut off in the middle of that and never remember where I was at. But it did turn out pretty good, surprisingly. I just thought it was fabulous having Oberon on here. I have never met him, so I was tickled to death that we could actually get him on here and talk to us. He is a wealth of knowledge. And as one of the elders in the community, I started my path in 1969. Oh my God. So it's been a long time. And he was one of the first pagans I really got to recognize. And I know, Nikki, you had a wonderful relationship with him for a long time. So I am totally green with envy on that one. I am my little green witch. You see, she's turning green.
I have that. It's actually in my warehouse in California, because I bought that sucker in California. I saw that and I'm like, ooh, that
was
awesome.
Gifted to me. That was a gift I got. That was one of my Yule gifts that I really loved. But you had a long time with Oberon. You want to expand on some of your dealings with the man?
Well, Oberon and I met him when I was teaching for the grade school of wizardry, and I taught there for 10 years. I was actually a dean of several different departments, including the general operations manager, as well as a professor. So I did a lot with him. And then I moved out to California, and I ended up having to have a place to stay. So he said that I could stay with him, and we were roommates for a good while. So Oberon is amazing. He has so much knowledge. Just sitting there and talking to him, as you can see, he can go on for hours and hours and hours. But unfortunately, we have come to the end of our show today. So next week, tune in at the same time. We're going to have our guest host, Reverend Raven Wolf Greenfield. Yes, everybody, if you don't know who he is, check out Witch School. He's got a blog that he does every single day on Facebook. So make sure you go and check him out. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Pam, for hosting with me. And that Witch's Cabinet was awesome. I believe people are going to be talking about that for like weeks and weeks to come. So you're an amazing person.
Thank you.
You're welcome, honey. So thank you, everybody. And you have an absolute wonderful day. And that is it for us. Okay, so.